Honors, do not repeat your past. Destroy the hero at its source.
They say imitation is the highest form of flattery, which is what I thought when I wore my brother's oversized hand-me-downs and attended his university party. Unfortunately, none of the female attendees felt the same way. Upsetting. And there's simply no way of escaping the similarities between this title and a certain Dead Cells. Let's address the elephant in the room nice and early. It's quite similar. Is it copycat or crappy copy? Let's find out. The story centers around the city of Callaghan, which is overwhelmed with numerous enemies seeking its destruction. In a world filled with technologies, the peoples of this world band together to create an elite new warrior class known as the Arbiters, of whom you play the first. It's your job to single-handedly take down the enemy force, and early in the game you're sent back to where it all began. As you progress through this story, there are a number of small text-based segments which act to partially fill in some of the missing lore. And as this is a linear title, I was really expecting they'd do a great deal in terms of narrative delivery, but it never really materialized, aside from these sparse documents. Although the protagonist will occasionally give some verbal context to the situations you're in.
First target down. Onwards and upwards.
But essentially, it's the same old save the world from destruction, which I've not got a problem with in itself, but a few between stage cutscenes wouldn't have gone amiss. Let's move on to gameplay and controls, and this is where the similarities will really begin to show themselves. You move your character with the left stick, there's a jump button, a slide button, which is essentially your dodge roll, and then a basic attack. There are a few different weapons to choose from. I think there's around about 5 that are held in your main hand, and then there's a number of ranged weapons as well. One of the first things you're going to want to know though is that this isn't a roguelite title. These are pre-designed, pre-made levels with a central hub area that you return to through teleporters. You can visit any of the levels you've been to, and in fact any of the teleporters within those levels. There are a number of secret items for you to discover, with that being the only real reason to return to them. Weapon pickups come in a variety of flavors, from standard to more rare and then legendary. But unfortunately, this is where the wheels got a little wobbly. There aren't enough to choose from, and the ones that are here don't have quite the variety I'd look for. It just felt like they needed a few more, or at least a few modifiers to change them. You can upgrade your character. Every time you kill an enemy, you'll gain some coins as well as these upgrade points, which are shown over here. And back in that main hub area, you can spend these to upgrade different abilities that you'll gradually unlock as you progress through the game. But this is where my next slight gripe creeps in, and it's that the upgrade system was a tad underwhelming. Yes, you can increase percentages and slightly improve overall character health, but as far as upgrades go, it didn't feel like many of them were big game changers. This could potentially be a hangover from my time with Dead Cells, but the same goes for the purchasing and upgrading of your weapons. Using the coins that you've collected, each weapon will have 3 potential upgrades. These will be random and slightly improve the statistics, but where's the option to buy new weapons? Why can't I save up these large quantities of cash and spend them choosing a weapon that I actually want? And that same niggling feeling persisted for the armor and rings that you collect as well. There's just not enough variety. Being able to deck your character out in different gear would have really added to the experience, and showing that on the avatar, just with that one simple change, they could have differentiated themselves a bit more from the competition. Combat, as I said, is quite straightforward. You'll have that simple attack button, and the enemies have a certain familiarity to them. Your ranged attacks will lock on automatically, but you'll only get a finite number of these. One nice mechanic I did like was that you can only replenish your ranged ammunition by doing physical attacks on the enemies. This created a nice flow and pace to the game, and early on I was really enjoying jumping from platform to platform, dodging behind an enemy, swiping a few times, and then firing off a few shots. Where something like Shantae really excels with being a single player, handcrafted action platformer is in the level design. And unfortunately here, many of these handcrafted levels feel more randomly generated than some of its rivals, which extends to the gameplay loop. I was hoping for some puzzle platform segments, and as the levels act almost as sandbox environments, allowing you to traverse backwards, forwards, vertically, or descend at your leisure looking for those secrets, there was a real chance here to include something other than flick this switch, go through the door. Fight the enemies, flick a switch, go through the door. It's such a shame. as that core combat is decent. Yes, it's familiar, but it's okay. And then the next aspect is actually really rather good, and that's the boss fights. At the end of each main stage, you'll fight a boss, and these are multi-stage affairs that can be really rather challenging and were one of, if not the best designed aspect of the game. This level structure perfectly suits a roguelite title because your main emphasis is on staying alive and getting new gear. But when it's a handcrafted, tailor-made experience, the player needs so much more to hold their engagement, and I didn't feel like they'd done enough here. It's by no means a bad game, and some levels stood out as far superior to others, with a couple of puzzle platform elements thrown in, but for the vast majority of it, it's just a touch lazy in that level design. Controls work well enough, you can grab and climb up to different platforms. Although on that note, some of these felt like they were just placed a tad too high and you'd fall down more often than you would want to. But the unlocking of some of the aerial abilities is nice. The whole thing just felt a bit like being that 16-year-old kid again, wearing my brother's hand-me-down Versace white jeans. Ouch. Gameplay for me overall, because of the excellent boss fights, the okay combat, and the average leveling system, scores 13 out of 20. And the controls, there's no real issue here. Unfortunately, the performance means the controls don't work the way they're supposed to, and we'll talk about that in the next section. Control score 14 out of 20. On to visuals and performance then, and this is where things get really slightly murky, and we'll begin with the curse of the uncapped frame rate. The game will shift from the high 50s down to the low 30s, the 20s, back up to the 40s, pretty much anytime there's an enemy on screen. And what this causes for the player is very obvious frame pacing issues. At times I had to stop playing because I was getting a real headache. The art style itself is lovely. I like the more bright colours, some of the vibrant parallax scrolling backgrounds look delightful. Enemy variety is okay, there's not enough, but the boss designs really are on point. What I didn't like though, and something to me so glaringly odd, was the run animation of your main character. The way her feet stay completely rigid as she moves, it just looks odd, like she's wearing a set of clown shoes, and once you've seen it, it can't be unseen. The same goes for the slide move. I can see why they went for a slide, as if they'd have gone for a roll, they'd have probably been strung up. It's just not quite right. Now, as far as sound and audio goes, things really are on point. From the character's voice, I enjoyed that, with her small quips that are often quite amusing, to the excellent soundtrack, which often shifts from the orchestral to the more bombastic and even onto the melancholic. It really is excellent music. Sound effects are decent, and look, even some of the weapon designs, I really liked the inspiration. Things like the gun chucks, that's absolute genius, but they needed more. But on the same note, perhaps they have borrowed a little bit too much. And as I mentioned, the frame pacing is an issue, even though there are some areas where it seemingly isn't a problem, like the hub one, but it still most definitely needs a patch. Visuals and performance score 13 out of 20, while the excellent audio and decent voice acting do a good job of lifting that up a touch. Audio scores 17 out of 20. The game retails at £24.99, which certainly places it in the premium category on the Nintendo Switch for indie titles of this nature, and inevitable comparisons will be made between a certain title I've mentioned far too many times, which retails at £22. The thing is, there's absolutely nothing wrong with pricing yourself in line with the effort and the value you feel like your experience is offering, but then you better make sure that it actually offers fluid performance and gameplay which doesn't end up monotonous. I feel like had the developers relinquished some of the reliance on those tried and true combat mechanics and focused more heavily on the level design itself, we'd be looking at a very different game, as there are flourishes and moments of real quality here. Unfortunately for me though, what I've played doesn't match this price. I give value 12 out of 20.
It was you who brought this devastation upon us.
Overall, Foregone is not a bad game. I'm not gonna lie, it left me feeling a bit forlorn, but that was more as a result of poor performance and weak level design. Perhaps they'll keep working on it and release some levels that match the passion they've put into some of the other areas. It gets a SwitchUp score of 69%. Let me know down in the comments what you think of this one. Is it a game you'll be looking to pick up or grab on sale? And as always, a big thanks to all of you who leave comments down below and just enjoy the channel. Thanks to the developer for the review copy, and to our patrons who support us each and every month. If you enjoy Switch content, then consider sticking around with the SwitchUp family. And as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it SwitchUp. Cheers guys, see ya!